starting streaming. Let's see if that's working. We are live. It says we're live. Hello,
we'll do it live!
Okay. Now, what I don't see is a way to tweet this that we're live.
That's funny. That's the same GIF that you sent out earlier. I didn't realize you had a soundbite queued up for that too.
Oh yeah, that's one of my favorite ones, man.
We'll do it live!
Gotta have that beep in there, though.
That's great. All right. Tony, do you want to try to tweet something that we're live? Let me see if I can do this.
You probably have the link if you want to shoot it over to me.
Actually, I just found out I'm not going to share it. I'm going to share it. Right, so, tweeted. Go ahead and retweet.
Okay.
Of course, you know I had to wear the obligatory Jeep
Yeah.
wear,
Nice.
right? As opposed to VMware wear. I was going to wear a VMware shirt, but I decided not to.
All right, well, don't say anything incriminating that could get you fired because we're live.
I have to worry about that.
All right. Tweet it out. And we are live.
All right, and the show Twitter has tweeted as well.
Okay.
Stop bumping my desk. Everybody ready?
Yep.
So you're going through Zoom over to YouTube, really?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Well, not through Zoom directly, but we can cover that a little bit once they get going here. All right. 3, 2, 1, music.
It needs all the things. Give it all the things. Oh, perfect. You nailed it.
You can't bend physics. What you can do is write better software.
And you're doing the MPLS changes or BGP changes. May God be with you, right?
I always feel like I'm just a little fish in a sea of big fish.
I've got a nested 6-node vSAN.
Aw, guys. People, quite often think that they don't have anything to bring to the table when they absolutely do.
Everybody should. Anybody in IT that skips the phone stuff, it just hasn't earned it.
Okay, I lied. I have one more question.
On demand.
Correct.
Welcome to Gigacast episode 26 for Sunday, January 27th, live to the interwebs, finally from the Gigacast headquarters. I'm Britton Johnson.
And broadcasting live from my home lab, I'm Tony Reeves.
Hey, we actually did it this time. We're live to YouTube, so
Yay!
If you're
And the peasants rejoiced.
Hanging out on the YouTube channel, we are there. And we have a podcasting pro in the house, so we're going to have sound effects on this episode.
Yes, we will.
Welcome to the show. This will be a fun one. Joining us, we'll just jump right into guest stuff. Why not?
Sure.
We have the illustrious Jace McCarty back for number 2 visit to the show. Jace, how are you?
Doing great. Good to see you guys.
You too.
So,
welcome back.
We last saw you in VMworld, and you were like in the best shape of your life. How's that continuing for you?
I'm still keeping the weight off. I'm just a couple pounds up, but it's wintertime, so hey, that's kind of expected.
Yeah,
right.
As far as that goes. So I imagine probably when I get closer to the summertime, I'll drop a little bit, more back to where I was. But feeling great.
Good.
Cool.
And our ultimate special, mega guest is Mr. Pete Fletcher. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Hey guys, thanks for joining me. No, let me try that again. Hey guys, thanks for inviting me.
Somebody used to be on the other side of that microphone.
Yeah, exactly.
Now you're on the other side. We're going to ask you the questions tonight, buddy.
Nice. I like it.
It's going to be a fun time. Tony, how are you?
I am doing good. How are you doing? Did you survive the sub-zero weather this weekend?
No, I was going to say, anybody out there who's thinking about coming to Wisconsin tomorrow, don't, because the entire state is closed.
Wow.
Yeah, school shut down. What are they? what are they predicting down there? We're saying up here around 10 inches.
Yeah, it's somewhere between 10 and 100 inches. I don't know. I mean, it's basically everything's just stopped. All of our schools got shut down right now tonight.
Yep.
So,
yep. We already got notification that our son's school is closed as well.
Yeah.
So
I think we had 6 inches last week, and I was like, I've had enough of this.
yeah, we got like 6 or 8 on Wednesday last week.
yeah,
you
we got a
know,
good chunk.
we're just kind of, and then it dipped down to like 20 below, and then it's gonna come back up for the snowstorm, and then right after that, it's gonna come back down to like -40. So
No.
yeah, it's bad.
Yeah, it's gonna be bad.
It's gonna be really bad.
Yeah, I think I'll pass on
The,
that.
the only downside of working from home is you don't get a snow day.
Hey, can I ask you a show note real quick? You started the show off, and we were all just sitting around, and was the music playing for you? Because I didn't hear it. I didn't know if.
Yeah,
What
I didn't
mus-
hear it
what
either.
music?
Is that
it should have
different
been
because we're
there.
live streaming, or because normally we do hear it?
I may have turned it down, but there
Oh,
was
okay.
music when I heard it. So
Yeah, you look like you were grooving to it. You look like you were in the zone, but we didn't hear it. So
all right, I may have turned it down too much on your end for that feedback, but oh
all
well.
good.
Either that or the stream is just screwing up with what's going back through Zoom. One of the two.
That could be too. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the first time doing that.
Oh, you know what? I didn't even check my Zoom settings to see what it's capturing. Because maybe it's capturing my. Yes, it is. It's capturing the built-in microphone.
Nice. So you're
That's
gonna have
why
to
you didn't
add
hear
that later on.
That's okay.
We'll do it in
You know what?
post.
Yeah,
I don't need to.
we don't have that
because-
soundbite.
You can make one.
Yeah. I'm not gonna exit. Get back to this. All right. Okay. So, Tony, do you have any news or updates before we jump into our conversations today?
I don't believe so.
Okay. All right. I really don't either. It's been kind of a. I mean, I feel like we just did this because we did. This is our bonus episode for January.
Yeah, we're normally not live twice in one month.
We usually don't do 2 in a month, and it just kind of worked out. And so I guess I'd like to take this moment to thank our sponsor for this episode, my wife, because, this is the reason we're having a bonus episode is because she's, taking care of the kids for tonight, and, they're having movie night upstairs. So my wife, the best wife in the world, I love you. Thank you.
You're a good guy.
Mm-hmm.
Same
She
goes
asked
for
me-
my wife
she's
as
just
well.
like,
I wouldn't be
when
able
are you
to do
gonna
this
do
without
something
her.
for me on the show?
As he sips from a cohesity drink, wearing a Veeam T-shirt.
Busted.
Yeah.
I need to grab some audio clips from the first Wayne's World where he's doing those sponsorship stuff.
Little yellow pill.
All this conversation is giving me a headache.
Is that why I have a headache tonight?
You need some Nuprin. Okay. So, Jace, we got a whole bunch of background story from you the last time you were on, which was really cool. So, I would like you to just sit back for a minute, and I want to get, Pete, your story from A to VMware, and just tell us, who the heck you are, what you really do for VMware, because I don't even know, and what in the world got you started in podcasting. So just kind of give us the Pete Fletcher story, if you would so enlighten us.
Sure, absolutely. So let's see, 10 years in the Air Force overseas for a while. I was in IT. I was in networking. I did a lot of Microsoft stuff. Got out of the Air Force, started doing consulting. I worked for Microsoft and Accenture, doing large-scale migrations of Active Directory and
So like serious consulting then.
Oh yeah. We migrated AT&T into their newest, Active Directory, doing all kinds of stuff. Really fun, big enterprise level consulting. Then, we were using on one of the projects when I worked for that company, we were using NetApp for some of our storage. And I had before this, I had been an application guy, so I didn't really care about storage. Storage to me was like, hey, provision me some storage so I can build some, applications.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but I started seeing some of the really cool stuff that you could do with storage. Like, wow, like you could rapidly clone volumes like instantaneously. And then you'd have like this huge clone and snapshots and all these things that were just like, they were really cool to me. So I was like, wow, I really like storage. And then somebody said, hey, you live in Raleigh, like NetApp is like in Raleigh. So, long story short, I met some folks that, told me this, and I ended up working for NetApp for a couple of years, but still didn't really know storage. I knew applications, and I started to get really interested in VMware. And I was like, man, I really like what VMware is doing. Like, I really want to go that direction. So when I worked for NetApp, I was actually a VMware administrator. I mean, a VMware technical marketing guy for NetApp. So I really didn't. Still, storage was interesting, but I was more focused on VMware. I really liked, what VMware had been doing. And so I did a podcast at VMware. I did a podcast in NetApp, the Tech on Tap podcast with a couple of my friends. And that started getting, we started getting, some good connections with the VMware folks. Long story short, I was doing a lot of joint papers and things like that with some of the tech marketing team at VMware. Started to create some inner workings in the storage and availability business unit. And then, Ken sent me the invite over to come join his team of rock stars that were just doing tech marketing for VMware, which is a pretty impressive team. I've never been on a team like the team I'm on now. I mean, these guys it's very humbling to be around guys that are so smart and just really, they do amazing work. And so my contribution to that team, as you were asking, is I focus on vSAN. That's my primary responsibility. I do a lot with vVols as well. So I do tech marketing, write content, documents, speak at VMware, write blog posts, create videos. And I also do the podcast. The podcast is kind of a side gig. So John and I do that, although it is, it's valued at VMware, but it's not owned by VMware. But it's still part of what I do. So much like yourself, you guys have a passion for the software-defined data center, and so do we. We think there's a lot of really smart people in the world. And so we do our best to just bring different people on the Virtually Speaking podcast and just do like what you're doing, just ask them what's going on, what do you do, how does that work? So that's kind of who I am and what I do at VMware.
Cool. That is a very good synopsis in a very tight space of time.
No kidding. You can tell that you have lots of practice doing this.
I have people skills. I am good at dealing with people. Can't you understand it?
See, that is the trick. That's when you can take a drink, is when you're waiting for the clip to play.
Absolutely. You
learn so much from you tonight, John. John,
I can just feel our production value going up. We're just absorbing and learning.
There you go.
Well, yeah, this is going to be fun. So, the other piece that I've never heard the official story where the name Pedro Arrow came from.
Ah, okay, yeah. I never worked for Arrow, so some people ask me that, which is always, I'm like, no, no, I wouldn't keep it if it was. Anyway, let's see. My first name is Pete. Spanish for Pete is Pedro. My last name is Flecha, which is actually Spanish for arrow.
Ah.
So the inverse of Pete Flecha is Pedro Arrow. There it is.
Wouldn't the inverse be Flecha Pete?
Yeah, you're right, but Pedro Arrow is a little bit better.
Arrow Pedro?
Vote for
I am
Pedro.
Flecha Pete.
vote for Pedro.
Yes, exactly.
All right. Tony, do you want to ask anything of Mr. Arrow?
So, what's your favorite part about, obviously you're doing things similar to us. What's your favorite part of running your own podcast?
Well, honestly, probably like you guys. For me, the best part about doing a podcast is I am a very curious person in general. I mean, I love learning new things, and I never claim to be the expert on everything. There's so many smart people in our industry, and it's like they all have great information. And so it's really cool to get different people on. And then I intentionally, we don't do we do bullets, right? I have a couple of bullets we want to talk about, but the curiosity is always best to capture on the podcast. So that's what I do. I'm naturally curious. And if we start talking about something that's really deep, we've had Jason several times. He'll start getting deep on whether it's automation, encryption, or stretch cluster. And he knows that way better than I do. So as the conversation starts to unfold, there's so much to ask. And so I love capturing that information and then sharing it. And probably like you guys, some of the feedback we've always heard, even when I was doing it for a storage company and then now for VMware, a lot of times we hear like, oh man, I listened to that one episode that you did on X product, and that really helped me understand it. And or I work in sales, and now I can even sell it better. Or somebody says, oh, this you guys really, I never thought about this one thing like that. And so it's great to learn for ourselves, but then why not share what you've learned with other people? So
Absolutely.
Yeah, and there's been plenty of different products that I haven't necessarily understood very well, and listened to your podcast, and you get a great guest on that that really knows it well and can articulate it. And yeah, you completely can understand it that way versus, reading some sort of a white paper.
Yeah, and what we try to do is our approach is a 30-minute podcast is all what we focus. Sometimes they go to 45 or whatever, but we try to keep it around 30 because the idea is I don't want to boil the ocean. I don't want to teach you everything you need to know on an audio podcast. The idea, it's almost like a movie trailer. Here, this is interesting. This is cool
Teaser.
stuff. Yeah, check this out. This is cool. Oh, here's the guy that knows a lot about it. Jay seems to be talking really well about this. So we'll leave you some references. And so on the show notes of the page, we'll have links to his blog. We'll have links to, videos that have been done. Also to Storage Hub, where all the main content is for what we talk about at VMware, like vSAN. So like anybody who's talking about that stuff, we make sure to reference the deeper information. So, you know where to go after you've listened to the podcast.
Awesome.
Yeah. I would love to produce more of that type of post-show content, but
yeah,
I'm just too lazy about that right now.
Oh, don't think about it like that. What I usually do is I tell the guest, give me links that you think are relevant to this episode. And then if something comes up, like if something comes up during the episode, then I'll be sure to add that as well. But usually my show notes consist of a paragraph of, hey, we talked to this guy, and this product, here's the value proposition of this product. Oh, and here are some links that we mentioned. And then boom, that's it. So it's not like it's not like a detailed show notes, but it's enough where if somebody wants to learn more about the podcast that we talked about, they know where to go.
Well, the difference is you actually have something up as opposed to nothing. I mean, the primary reason that I do this live to tape is because I just don't want to edit anything. And so I just, and I think it works. It kind of makes it like I've tried editing some of the episodes, and it feels chopped up, and it feels feels like it's been toyed with. And I like it. I like it to be like a natural conversation, right? And so, that's where my laziness actually wins.
Oh, I have to tell you. So the first time I ever heard your podcast, I didn't know who you were.
Right.
I knew who Tony was, but I heard your first episode and I immediately liked it. I was like, oh my goodness, I really like this guy, because you have this thing where you're like, first of all, you've got a great podcast voice. You've also got a face for radio, but you definitely have a voice for radio. and I was just like, this guy is like, you just reminded me of like a professional radio DJ, where you were just kind of like, you definitely do it different than we do, right? We're much more like, okay, 30 minutes, we're on this, we're going to edit it. And you guys are just like, yeah, what's up? So, anyway, and I just love that. I love the casual. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. So, and the content was good. You get great guests.
We're like the Bob and Tom of IT podcasts.
There we go.
It's working. So keep doing it.
Only the G family friendly version.
Yeah, right. Is Bob and Tom even still a radio show? I don't know. They are. They were. If they were a thing in Wisconsin, I thought they were a national show too, but maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Here is. Let's talk. Let's get into the weeds and some stuff. This was sort of my question that is kind of boiled in the back of my head because of some conversations I've had recently with people at VMware. I've heard a lot of talk about how, VMware's direction as a software company is becoming sort of almost cloud first. And it's stuff like NSX for multi-cloud, VMware, VMC, VMware Cloud and AWS, all of these sort of cloud things that are happening, right? And so what I really want to hear from you guys, since you're in the storage and availability business unit, vSAN is your bag. How does vSAN and this the Sabu direction of adding to the value of VMware as a company fit into the overall scheme of VMware kind of becoming more and more of a cloud company? You know, is there stuff you can talk about surrounding that? Jace, let's get you in this.
No pressure. So I don't know, the way I look at it, right? And this is, and I'm going to kind of move away from the vSAN part of the conversation, at least initially, right?
Yeah.
And I'll circle back there. But the way that I look at it is, and kind of where we provide value from a storage perspective, and you don't see a lot of people in the field talking about this. I mean, there are some out there and some non-VMware people too, right? But it might, the last place I worked, I used to work for what is now part of Dell, but and we talked about it a little bit, but it wasn't really anything we could necessarily at the time capitalize on. But to me, if you think about the way that we approach, whether it be cloud-based infrastructure, whether it be on-premises based infrastructure, whatever, wherever it is, right? To me, the most value is being able to consume, provision, report on, whatever, based on policy, right? I mean, we handle people based on policy. We handle, we have the capability of handling storage on policy, whatever, right? So if you look at it from that perspective, and the interesting part is, is storage policy based management really part of? Is it part of Sabu? Is it not part of Sabu? I think there's a little bit of a blur, right? Because some of the storage stuff is still kind of done on the vSphere side, but then we still bring a lot, to the table there, from a Sabu perspective. So if you look at storage consumption from the if you look at it from what we were doing initially with tag-based, storage policies, and then we kind of moved to vVols at least early on, and then vSAN came in there at the kind of the same time. If you look at that, if we look at the storage provisioning side of things, which, hey, what if I get to the point where through an orchestration through VRA, I say I need a workload that has this, all based on policy, and depending on that policy, it could deploy locally or it could deploy to the cloud, just depending on cost, availability, requirements, whatever, right? So if you think about it, compute's kind of easy, where are the resources or what are the resources cost? Let's put some values to it there. But at the same time, we can do that with storage, and I haven't worked with this specifically personally yet. Pete, I'm not sure if you have or not. I know that our boss, Jeff Hunter, as well as some of the other guys in the larger TM team within Sabu have worked with this, but like with HCX, being able to move a workload while it's running from vSAN or vVols up to VMC, hand that off, move it back. I mean, really, it's kind of, where is it the best fit? Let's make sure we adhere to a policy, meet the requirements, meet the cost. Hey, we find out 3 months later, either the cost is not what we want, or the where we want the workload to be is not necessarily the same, right? That kind of thing. And the fact that we can move it back and forth, and it's all based on policy. Somebody's got to be making those storage, conversations when it comes to those policies, right? And that's kind of where I think Sabu comes in. We've got some things in the hopper that, we've kind of talked about a little bit at VMworld and whatnot that are not out there really publicly yet. I'm not going to go into any of those, but that said, we've always got things going on, and from a Sabu perspective, what you see and what we've got are coming are kind of a couple different things, if you will. Is that a good way to put it, Pete?
Oh yeah, my take on it, similar to what Jason said, is so when you think about cloud, right? Like VMware Cloud on AWS runs on vSAN. vSAN is in the edge, it's on the core, and it's in the cloud. Sabu also focuses with disaster recovery. Disaster recovery is not going away. That's a big part of what we do, right? Whether it's Site Recovery Manager, whether it's the I forget the name of it for AWS, but it's like recovery. It's a similar, thing, but it's all that is Sabu. So Sabu has lots of uptick, and there's a lot of really cool stuff going on there, and a lot of cool projects. Even some of the containers. And I'm going to plug it because it's important. But VirtualBox is where we park all our content, and I was just on there over the weekend looking because recently one of our buddies, Miles Gray, posted an awesome post about using vSAN for Kubernetes. And cloud native apps and stuff. And so like that stuff is everywhere. You know, there's no, VMware is a huge company, and we do have big, if you talk to someone who's NSX, they're going to be like, oh yeah, it's all about NSX. You talk to somebody in the Sabu, they're like, yeah, it's all about vSAN, of course.
Right.
So you might get different opinions on the individual, but I will tell you that as Jace alluded to, sometimes that stuff just kind of, there's a lot of overlap. When Glenn Sizemore works on our team, he focuses on VMware Cloud on AWS, but his team, there are tech marketing folks that are in, because what is VMware Cloud on AWS? Well, it's got storage, it's got vSAN, it's got vSphere, and it's got NSX. So everybody has a piece of the VMware Cloud on AWS. It is storage, compute, and it's also networking. Same thing with some of these other projects that we got going on. Some of them we won't talk about, but there's a lot of overlap between the BUs because we're one big company and we're trying to manage everything in the data center. It's a software-defined data center, and that includes soft storage. It always will, and that in itself, that's only going to get more and more. I mean, what are we at? We have 17,000 customers now out of how many million? How many? I don't even know how many vSphere customers, but it's insane. And there's only 17,000, which is great for 4 years. I mean, it's amazing. We're really killing it, but it's going to get more. So there's a lot of room for Sabu, if you will, to grow.
All right. I'm just curious because as a partner and an outsider, I talk to people in different areas of the company, and I admittedly I talk to a lot of the NSX people, and so for them, their top of mind is everything security and networking related, and they're just like, you don't need that vSAN thing.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. It's funny when it comes to vSAN and talking security and that kind of stuff, right? We actually are the first HCI solution positioned as an HCI solution. I'll say it in that way, right? That is a FIPS 140-2 validated solution. Now, that being said, after we went and basically got our encryption module validated and whatnot, then one particular competitor who has had software-based encryption for years and years and years and years finally said, hey, you know what, we're HCI too. Well, okay, whatever, we could argue that maybe, but when it comes to that, right, we're really the first one to focus on that, as far as that goes. And we do a lot of work with the, if you're familiar with DISA from a federal perspective, which a lot of people think DoD and that kind of thing, but they don't necessarily realize they will quite often only associate that with the government and the military, right? When in fact, I know when I was in the financial sector as well as when I was in the health insurance sector, we would quite often look at DISA guidelines when it came to the way we set things up to be secure, right? And we're actually the only, vendor that's got a DISA or is part of a DISA published STIG, right? That's publicly available. In fact,
can you quickly define what FIPS is for anybody who's not aware?
So FIPS is one of those wonderful acronyms that we have to deal with.
Industry standard.
Federal Information Processing Standard, right?
There we go.
So FIPS 140 is the number -2, and there are a couple of different levels. There's like a level 1, level 2, level 3, and so forth. And that deals with, is it software-based protection? Is it software with hardware-based tampering protection, and so on and so forth. There are a couple of different ones as far as that goes. But kind of really what it says is it's kind of the, I don't know. I would say, because it's government, I hate to say the gold standard, right? But
it's just a universally accepted standard of security.
Right. It's a better way to say it, as far as that goes. Not to say there's not, value there as far as that goes, but, and we actually do work closely with DISA to make sure that within reason, if you will, as newer versions of our software come out, that we can then provide, hey, look, from 6.0 to 6.5, these are the changes that occurred, right? And the interesting part is the people within VMware that work directly with DISA for that documentation, they also reach out to the different, I would say, application owners or software owners or whatnot. I work very closely with a couple of the guys, and they're like, hey, what are the changes in 6.5 that I need to be aware of compared to 6.0? And then myself and Mike Foley and other folks, will contribute and give them basically the gambit of here are the things that have changed. If you need a deeper dive, here are the engineers or the PMs you need to speak with, and so on. And they go and then they then propose that to DISA, and DISA comes back and says, "Oh, okay, cool, this is good," and let us go through our review on it. At some point, they will publish it, right? So there's a lot, there's a lot of that's one of the great things that and Pete kind of alluded to it a minute ago, as far as cross BU collaboration. We actually have quite a bit of cross industry collaboration, whether it be
Oh yeah.
with our partners at Dell EMC, or whether it be some of the other vendors out there, HPE, Lenovo and whatnot, as well as some of the smaller players that not everybody's heard of necessarily. So there's a
Yep.
lot of back and forth. Probably 20% of my week is nothing but talking to external parties.
Yeah, and even on the cross BU, like that's cross. So cross BU, just the last update for vSAN, we've got integration with. Well, it actually came the last version, but now it's even better. But we have integration with vSphere Update Manager, which is not a Sabu product, but it's now a core function of vSAN, which is huge. And I think Tony, you and I talked about VUM integration before.
Yep.
But also, VROps integration. Like all these things. All the things that make vSAN better in these past couple of updates that we've had are cross BU collaboration type things. And so, we love NSX as well, but man, like a lot of what vSAN is doing is not staying in a silo of just storage. It's full data center solution, because hyperconverged infrastructure, which is what vSAN is, doesn't have the luxury of just being a storage product. It is, it's
Right.
hyper-converged infrastructure. It's everything. So, which means analytics. So we got to work with all of the reporting. It means, obviously storage and performance. And so that's really core to vSAN and availability and all that stuff. But it also crosses to networking. It crosses to the to support. We have that vSAN support insight, which is a big part of vSAN, where, like if you we're sending obfuscated data up to support folks, so they can actually see your vSAN environment. They can't see your data, they can't see your specific configuration information other than the config information, but they can't see your personal, like your IPs. And why that's important is, when you're having a problem, they've already got all the logs. They can see, how your environment is configured. Absolutely. You don't have to spend time updating, uploading logs to even get your ticket, before they can even start to figure out what the problem is. They can immediately be like, all right, we've already got the logs. We can see that this is the problem. You've got a driver that's failing, or whatever the case. And so, that's a really, these are the types of things where you can't just be a storage product. You have to work cross BU with a company like VMware, which to me, I think is exciting. I mean, VMware has always been this full stack solution anyway, and I think storage fits very nicely into that.
Yeah, and there's something I want to go over with you guys, and you may or may not be able to share some of this stuff, but some of the most interesting sessions to me at VMworld are some of the Christian Dickman sessions, the forward-looking sessions, the enhancements, feature sets. Is there anything that this is for either one of you that you guys can actually are allowed to talk about, upcoming feature enhancements, things that may be planned, anything that you can kind of speak to on that you're allowed to? Look at Jace chuckling already.
Can you tell us what the next number is going to be?
42. Now, right, because 42 is the answer to everything, right?
Right.
Well, we've got some betas out there right now that are not full. And Jace, if you want to jump on some of them, I can. For one, file services is something that's coming out soon. It's not, and I'll be the first to say this loud and clear. It is a version 1, edition of something that has been, in a lot of storage arrays for many, many years. But VMware is playing with file services for the first time, and so that's, there's nothing official to announce here other than the fact that there is a beta going on, and we're testing that in storage. That was one of the betas. Jace, anything else that you can think of?
I mean, I can think of some couple other things, right, as far as that goes, but and I'm probably not going to cover them as far as that goes, but I will say, or I was going to say something, I completely lost my train of thought there. I'm trying to, I can't really articulate what I'm trying to say here. This is frustrating. I will say that I'll be honest with you, I've literally been like this, just blinders on, for probably the better part of the past month, working on a document that I've got coming out. specific to I call it a Power CLI cookbook for vSAN.
Okay.
Now, cookbook is like, recipes and here's how you
Yeah,
do this
sure.
and whatnot. And I didn't really approach it from the perspective of here's a recipe to enable encryption. Here's a recipe to do this. There's a little bit of that, right? As far as it goes, there's a good bit of here's how you would do this and here's how you would do that and the other and that kind of thing. But to give an example, right? If you look at one of the updates in 6.7 update 1, trim and unmap for VMs that
Oh, yeah.
support it, right? A lot of people have asked for that. It's one of those things that you have to log into the RVC, run a quick little configuration change. You've got to, I think, power off your VMs that you expected on, that kind of thing. So I'm like digging through the API, trying to figure out how do I take this RVC command and turn it into a Power CLI command to kind of make it easier, right, for people to be able to enable it, that kind of thing. And I work very, very closely with the team that does the commandlets for Sabu, right? And when I say commandlets for Sabu, trying to get some work done on some vSphere replication stuff.
Okay.
I think I may have found a recent bug with the SRM commandlets, but I really focus a lot on the vSAN based commandlets, that kind of thing. But kind of where I'm getting at with this is, as I reached out to the guys, I was like, hey, look, I'm trying to do this in Power CLI, looking at the get vSAN view, commandlet. It doesn't expose this. They go, yeah, we're not exposing it now. And I'm like, well, we've released this feature. We've got people, asking for an easier way to do this. How do I go about doing this? That kind of thing. And they're like, okay, we'll work on it. Hopefully, we can get it out in the next release or 2 or 3 or whatever at some point in the future, right? But kind of where I'm getting at that specifically is we're constantly working on it. We're constantly changing. Some of the things that we've done in 6.7, as an example, were backported to 6.6.
Mm-hmm.
Right? In fact, there's something I've been working on for probably 3 years now. I've been trying. Anybody who knows me and what's close to me when it comes to parts of our product and feature set with vSAN, they can clue in on this, but I'm not going to say what it is. But literally for 3 years, I've been working on getting this one little thing done to be easier, and it looks like work's being done on it. And I'm like, well, hey, can we do this for 6.7? And they said, well, we could do it for 6.7, and maybe we can even backport it to 6.6, right? That kind of thing. So kind of where I'm getting at is we get a lot of customers, and I deal a lot with the government side of the house too. They don't always get to upgrade as quickly as everybody else. They may say, well, because of this reason, I can only stay on vSphere 6.5 and vSAN 6.6 or whatever.
Sure.
But we continually, you may see a new feature in 6.7, and if you look under the release notes or under the covers for 6.6, you may find the same one there, right? So that's, a lot of stuff you see in announced, loudly and proudly in 6.7, you'll actually find in 6.6.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. Like resync fairness as an example, right? That was something that got found its way into 6.6, and then also something that I argued with the PM for vSAN in January of 2016. I was like, hey, why are our swap files space reserved? Oh, well, if you ever run out, if your swap files run out of space, then your VM will crash. And I said, I understand that. I understand that. I said, but
Yep.
if I'm running out of space for my swap files, I've got bigger problems. I've got bigger problems. So a bit of a compromise was made. We introduced sparse swap files in vSAN 6.2 about 2 months after that. Well, in 6.6 or in 6.7, we introduced the ability for swap files to inherit the same policy that the namespace uses.
Okay.
I was in a conversation with someone the other day, and they said, "Oh yeah, and the swap files got the same policy as the as the namespace." And I said, "Is this 6.7?" And they said, "No, it's 6.6." And I said, "Wait a minute, this is 6.6?" "Oh yeah, this is like update whatever of 6.6." They backported that. Oh wow,
Nice.
I didn't know that. Right, so we're constantly doing sneaking in little things that you have to really read the release notes to
Oh
understand.
Yeah, and that
Right,
saves customers a lot of money, because they don't have to worry about allocating all this storage space for swap files. So that's a big thing. And honestly, that was something that Jace was yelling about. I think the first day I met him.
I had conversations with him about it several years ago as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude he would tell anyone who would listen, and guess what? They listened, and as a result, people are saving a lot of money. So yeah, I think that's pretty cool. A lot of cool things in the future. We had a podcast episode a couple of weeks ago with William Lamb and one of the guys who actually wrote engineered the code for ARM, ESXi on ARM.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that was pretty cool, man. And so he shared some stuff with us, and and I won't obviously I want to keep my job, so I won't share too much about what's happening. But one of the things that they did share was that they are experimenting with how to use ESXi in vSAN. ESXi on ARM, and how would that look? What would that look like? And how can we
That'd
make
be interesting?
Yeah. And so it's so there's some cool stuff there that's being looked into, and it just sort of really solidifies the fact that the storage and availability. There's so much going on. There's so many different pieces and people working on different things that it's definitely an exciting place to be for sure.
So I can buy a bunch of Raspberry Pis and go down to my local Best Buy and roll your own vSAN, right?
Yeah.
Well, so if you think about it though, I mean, how much RAM does the Raspberry Pi have? Like a gig?
Yeah.
So which services are you going to run? Right, as far as that goes. But in the same ARM platform, they've got some other very, very low cost. Like I looked at an ARM box a couple weeks ago or about a month ago that had like 4 gigs of RAM, and it was maybe only about 20% more than a Raspberry Pi. So I think we're going to see industry-wise, we're going to see more and more, cost-effective, ARM type gear.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean,
I've seen a lot of arguments around that, and a lot of people are saying similar things, or what can you do with it? It's not a lot of RAM there, but there's lots of different devices that run ARM, and you can throw a lot more RAM at it.
And as a matter of fact, when you start thinking about those, the edge, right? I mean, wind turbines, things that are not really, don't think about a traditional, 2U server sitting in an office. Think about your car. Think about things like things that are going to be managed by something. And VMware is going to be part of that. They're going to manage things, whether it's the inventory, the patching, the updating on devices, on the Internet of Things, if you will. So there's a lot of room for growth in that future space. And of course, the initial thought when people saw the Raspberry, when Ray O'Farrell, hands Pat Gelsinger the Raspberry Pi at VMworld, he's like, oh, by the way, here, this is running ESXi. Everybody was like, oh, that's great, but what are you going to do with that? And it's like, that mindset is like, oh, okay, so you're still thinking in 2017, where these guys are thinking in 2020,
Or
2025.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I had this conversation with an OEM not long ago, right? And we were talking about like edge use cases and whatnot. The conversation started off, in 2-node vSAN, that kind of thing, and then we started getting a little bit more granular, and like I have a friend of mine that used to own a gas station, and from time to time I'd get a call, hey, I've got the guy from Exxon's going to come in and he's got to do this and this, but I'm having a problem with the network, and he didn't know anything about it. He didn't contract anybody local or whatnot, but you look at all those different edge environments, whether it be a gas station, whether it be an ATM somewhere or whatever, a pharmacy, whatever. There's so many opportunities. Whether I mean, think oil and gas and oil derricks and pumps and things like that. I mean, there's so many different opportunities for edge type, deployments. It's ridiculous. Now that may or may not include a whole lot of storage. I mean, does that really matter? As far as that goes. But at the same time, it could be that they need a bit of distributed data, as far as that goes. What if you've got an oil field that's essentially got ARM-based vSAN across all these oil derricks, with some resiliency to it? Or even think of the battlefield with, you've got all these Humvees, and I can survive this many Humvees being offline due to, whatever, right? IEDs or, I mean, all that stuff, I would say VMware in some form or fashion has to be, I don't know these people personally, right? Has to be looking at those types of use cases, as far as that goes. So, I mean, the fact that work is being done on ESXi on ARM is exciting.
I am profoundly dumbfounded.
Absolutely.
John
Thanks for
did join the
chiming in, John.
podcast after all.
So we actually had a couple of live viewers, and we actually have a question from the audience.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So I think this is probably directed at Pete. The question is, do you think 2019 is the year that we'll see more widespread adoption of VVols?
That is a good question.
Pete is right.
But so VVols is definitely is one of those things where we've been talking about it for a while. And, you know, initially the inhibitors that we've seen, as some may not know this, but real quick, the inhibitors to VVols initially was everyone's like, oh, what a great idea. Granular management of my storage with policy-based management. I can finally get rid of LUNs because everybody knows
LUNs suck.
I don't want to configure my LUNs. I don't want to configure IQNs. I want to just have one big happy data store where I can have different classes of service and manage that by policy. This is what the data center is promising. This software-defined data center. I want to be able to. I want to automate when I can. I want to be having a policy-driven environment. And VVols was bringing this promise, but the only problem is everyone was like, great, but I can't replicate the data yet because it doesn't support array-based replication, or my storage vendor that I use doesn't support VVols yet. And so those were like the key inhibitors, for a lot of folks. And then the other big one was nobody was moving to, not everybody, the shift, if you will, of folks moving off of 5.x was still there, and like Jay said, sometimes government and other large organizations, they don't jump on every new version of vSphere, so it takes a while. But when those upgrades happen, what we're seeing now is a hockey stick of uptick on VVols, because number one, we support array-based replication. Number two, everybody's moving off of 5.x because it's not supported. And number three, all storage vendors are having a version of VVols. And so 2019 is already is going to be definitely, there's going to be more uptick, because as we look at the numbers, even all of last year, it has just been going higher and higher and higher as people move on to 6.x. So I'm definitely excited. I have a call tomorrow with yet another VVols customer that, that people are using this in production, and it's getting more and more and more. So we always knew that was going to happen. Nobody really jumps on a 1.x product. I mean, did anybody even ever buy vSAN 5.5, other than test and, it was test and dev, it was the very first version of VMware trying to jump into this fully, mature storage environment. And so after 4 years, things changed, and VVols has been around for about, almost 3 years now. So it's starting to get its legs, and I'm working with some really large customers here in Raleigh that are using VVols in production, like, constantly. Cody Hosterman from Pure, is constantly reaching out to me with some of his customers to help about different situations. And so we're seeing uptick. And I will say, I don't even know if I'm allowed to say this, but I will say some storage vendors that may be related to VMware are putting heavy engineering resources into VVol specific applications. And that's a sign that it's not going anywhere. And so, yeah, is 2019 going to be the year of VVols? It is definitely going to be a continuing. We're going to see the growth in 2019 for sure.
So I want to kind of step back 2 steps a little bit, and this is a selfish question. I have a client that I've sold my first VxRail kit to a customer. So, you can play the celebration song there if you have. Thank you. So what comes with that, of course, is, it's all vSAN all the time. So this is, when we go through the migration process and the move-in process, in your guys' experience and things you've heard from customers, what are maybe a couple of key things to look out for as you're moving from your traditional SAN vendor product to, a fully baked solution like VxRail with vSAN?
Okay. Well, first of all, you sold something that's got vSAN, so we got to play the vSAN song.
vSAN hyperconverged.
Now,
vSAN.
now that you
technology,
absolutely. Now that you've bought vSAN, that's awesome. But there are some things you want to consider, right? And Tony, I think you know this well. We've had some of these conversations, but one of the big questions we get is, well, how many nodes do I need, and how do I configure this so I can stay available? And so one of the big questions is, when you're doing your architecture, how many hosts do you configure?
Well, that's already taken care of because Dell built all that for us.
Okay.
So now they're gonna come, they're gonna rack it and stack it and set it up. So I'm talking about the day one move of getting stuff, actually running on it. What do we have to look out for there?
Are they going to already configure all your disk groups for you? Is everything going to be already configured?
See, I don't know. I've never done one of these before.
I think Rail does that. As it is. I think.
Okay.
I mean, and keep in mind.
I think they do.
Keep in mind, we're a little bit like this when it comes to some of the nuances, if you will, as far as what Rail will and won't do, right? As far as that, there are some things that VMware will say, oh, absolutely, we support that, we're good, and then Rail will go, we want to make sure that you're up to speed on this before we allow you to do that, right? That kind of thing. And specifically, I'm talking about like a stretch cluster or whatever. They have some additional steps that they require to ensure that you're familiar with it. But that's one of the situations that I find from a just knowing the product the way I do. It's important to understand the behavior, maybe not necessarily super deep dive or whatnot, but I was talking with a customer at VMworld, and they were saying, hey, look, we were trying to get some performance out of this one VM, so we went and we changed the policy for that one particular disk for the VM, and we really, really liked the results. So when we did that, we said, hey, let's apply that policy to all the VMs, to all the objects. And what they did was they had a stretch config, but in that stretch config, they configured a stripe width policy of 4, or number of stripes per object of 4. Well, when they did that, that meant that every individual VMDK across the entire cluster, in each fault domain, if you will, as far as that goes, had to maintain that particular policy. Well, so they go and they do that, and everything's running great and whatnot. Well, then they have a host fail. Well, they have a host fail, and in the process of having that host fail, of course, it's offline at that point. They go and they put another host in maintenance mode. Well, they didn't realize that when you put a host in maintenance mode that says, hey, I'm not taking any updates, I'm going to sit over here to the side for now, right? Because I'm in maintenance. And they didn't realize that. And they had a couple VMs go offline. Well, they went offline because they forced them offline. So kind of where I'm getting at with this is it's good to have at least a somewhat of a working knowledge of what happens when a host goes in maintenance mode, what happens when a device fails, or when a host goes offline, and so on and so forth.
Right.
The host that went offline, the data was fine. It's just it was absent, right? Because we look for a given amount of time. Hey, that host has lost power, and we're expecting it to come back in a certain amount of time, or it's being patched or whatever. Well, those objects were absent. Well, when they went and they put another one and forced it into maintenance mode, they pulled off another set of components that basically made some of their VMs inaccessible, and that was something they did. So those kind of things I think are important to understand. Now, another thing that's important to understand is when you're moving those workloads over from a traditional environment over to vSAN is what policies are required. Right. And what I mean by that is let's say, for instance, I've got this. Am I losing power here? Oops. You guys hear that beeping?
Yeah, UPS system.
What's going on? All right. Maybe the VR. Maybe the VR in the other room is sucking down too much power. Anyway, but like they'll go and they'll have one disk on one data store. That's, let's say, maybe RAID 5, RAID 6, RAID DP, whatever, and they may have another VMDK part of that same VM that's actually on a RAID 1 based data store for performance or whatnot. It's important to kind of know what they're coming from and kind of what what they're going to is, right? So that's part of it, as far as that goes. And then also, ensuring policy compliance, right? It's not just set a VM and set a policy and then that's it. you do have to go in and kind of look every now and then and kind of see where things are, if things are offline or also when you go to
Resyncing components.
yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah. Yeah, well, give an example, right? So I wrote a Power CLI script not too long ago that will let you go from we have a memory config change when we support clusters larger than 32. So I made a Power CLI script that would go through and it would literally make the setting change, and you have to reboot the host. But what I did was I waited until all resyncs were done on the cluster before rebooting the host. And Christian Dickman, some other folks were like, "Hey, why are you doing that? If a host goes into maintenance mode, then it's going to be protected anyway." Well, yes, I understand that, but if I'm sitting here waiting, looking at a script, waiting for this host to go into maintenance mode, I'm going to scratch my head. Why is it not in maintenance mode? And I force it, then I've done something bad, right? It's going to resync anyway. So I added that piece to be able to give the administrator the ability to watch, right? As a, so little nuances like that, is kind of the way I look at it. What do you think, Pete?
Yeah, absolutely. And on the maintenance mode tip, Britton, one of the things that's important for folks to understand is in a storage world, when you put a host in maintenance mode, you're only thinking compute.
Right.
You're thinking, well, where do these VMs reside? Oh, so VM 1, 2, and 3 reside on host 1. VMs 3, 4, and 5 reside on host 2. With storage, it's different, right? The compute, yes, it's gonna be exactly the same, but the distribution of the components that make up a specific virtual machine's disk are going to be based on the policy are either going to be RAID 1, there'll be a copy on 2 different hosts, or they're going to be striped across multiple hosts. But the location of that you never have to worry about as an administrator, which is a beautiful thing. You can see where it is. One of the times that you at least want to be maybe cognizant of what's going on is when you're putting a host in maintenance mode. You're going to be given some questions. Okay, so you want to put host 1 in maintenance mode that has VM 1, 2, and 3? Great. It also has storage components for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 on this host. What do you want to do with this? Do you want to migrate all that data to a host that's going to stay online, which depending on your environment could be very time consuming, and you might not even have that much time in your maintenance window? Or do you want to keep it where it is and let vSAN handle it, like we talked about with being absent for up to 60 minutes. And so therefore, if I put it in maintenance mode, I run some updates. When the host comes back online, vSAN's going to go, oh, you're back. Let me true up. Let me sync all the deltas to make sure that this host that was offline is now up to date with any changes that may have happened. And so you're given some questions that you're not normally given when you're talking about a SAN environment that's like tiered storage or separate storage as opposed to HCI. So maintenance mode is one of those considerations, and it's all taken care of for you. vSAN does a really good job of making sure you don't shoot yourself in the foot. But you want to do some experimenting when you're looking at things like maintenance mode and start digging around in the configuration of vSphere to see, what components are actually, that belong to the different VMs are actually residing on a host that I might potentially want to put into maintenance mode. So
cool.
Yeah. So, let me just add real quick.
Yeah.
I mean, really, any scaled system is going to behave the same way, right? As far as that goes, you've got to be aware. You can't just take this guy out, take this guy out, take this. I mean, you can't, right? And then going further, if we kind of take it out of the scaled system side of things, if I'm doing replication, well, replication in itself is pretty easy. Let's just replicate, boom, replicate, replicate, replicate. But when you get to the point where you look at application level consistency in replication, where you've got consistency groups, where let's say, for instance, the web tier, the app tier, and the data tier are all snapped at the same time, so they're consistent before they're replicated, that kind of thing. So they're the same point in time, right? It's really just it's a different way of looking at things, and you kind of got to have a better idea of what's going on across the board, right? Whether it be, like a disaster recovery type system. This is just a scaled system. Like if you were to step back 10 years ago and look at an Isilon cluster as an example, and you decided to do this and do this and do this and do this, you may have a situation where you've got data inavailability. I talked to a customer before I left my last job, and we were doing a root cause analysis for some VMs going offline, and he said, well, we were doing a test. We ended up basically disconnecting these two sides of the cluster. And I said, well, yeah, that's why you had a problem. Oh, really? I was testing the availability, and it's like,
oops.
so yeah. So again, that's not a that wasn't a that was a scaled system, right? A scaled out system, but it was only storage. Here we've got vSphere on top of it as well. That type.
All right. So the wisdom that I'm hearing is, and especially what I should advise the customer who bought this thing, is before they fully move their environment into it, they should probably move in just a couple of meaningless machines and kick the tires and
I would say
turn
that
some
with
stuff
anything.
on and off and just see what happens.
Yeah, I would say that with anything, right? I'm not saying necessarily just vSAN for that matter.
Right.
Anything you're not familiar with, I mean, I've seen
if you buy a race car, right? Same thing, right? If you buy a race car, you might want to figure out how to drive a race car. It's a little different than driving a regular car. You know what I'm saying? You might want to put the same gas and same oil in it. So it's going to be different. And so, yeah, you definitely want to have someone who knows what they're handling. But, I don't think there's anything specific to vSAN that you need to be cautious about. You just, obviously, you want to have someone that knows how to handle your infrastructure, and they should know what they're, know how to handle it.
It's kind of like using brakes in the snow, right? So like, I mean, I was driving the other day, I've got the Jeep in 4-wheel drive and I'm just kind of going along. And then I went to hit the brakes and I'm like, and it's because my wheels locked up. Well, they locked up because I hit the brakes. I needed to pump the brakes instead, that kind of thing. It's like driving in Louisiana versus driving in snow-laden, Colorado. Different environments, just a little bit different, and need to know what the nuances are.
Yeah, and you should tell them. Sorry, Tony. I was going to say you should tell them that storagehub.vmware.com. We have there's so much information on this portal that has how to learn and evaluate, showing operations guides, best practices, FAQs, demo videos, offline environments where you can actually test this stuff and see the different things that vSAN can do. So if they're new to vSAN and they're just getting it for the first time, even if they haven't set the gear up, there's a lot of content that can sort of get them up to speed on Storage Hub.
Yeah. Well, and part of that is that's why we really were intrigued with VxRail as a solution, because they'll come out, hook it all up, do the full configuration. It's a turnkey product, and at the end they just have to set up whatever policies they want.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, so at the same time, right, as far as that goes, let's say I go and I have a VM that's mirrored, and I've got a 4-node all-flash cluster, let's say 6-node all-flash cluster, whatever, and I decide to convert that over to erasure coding RAID 5 as an example. Well, I need to know that I'm going to make a full copy of that data as I'm converting it from mirrored to erasure coded, right? So if I've got 200 gigs of mirrored data, which from a raw perspective is 400 gigs, right? Mm-hmm. Keep in mind, we expose raw. We don't expose protected, if you will, right? So now I've got 400 gigs here, but then if I go and I make an erasure-coded copy of that, then I've got to make a full copy of it with the new protection scheme. Now that's not really a big deal, if you will, in the grand scheme of things, but what if I apply a policy to 400 VMs at one time and I've got 70% utilization right now? That's an operational thing that I need to be aware of, that if I go and say, do it, then I'm probably going to get really close to, I mean, we've got some protection in later versions that kind of prevent you from just completely filling it up, as far as that goes. But it's important to realize, hey, is this something I can do? Or, it's kind of like, there are some trails that I probably could accomplish with the Jeep, but when I'm done, the Jeep may not be in the best shape, right, afterwards. Mm-hmm. I will give another teaser, though, for my Power CLI cookbook coming out pretty much this week, right? We've got goals due this week, right, Pete?
Oh, yeah. Friday. Okay. It better be out by Friday.
Yeah, it'll be out by Friday. So, but I do have a little PowerShell script that will literally go and look at, say, give me all the VMs that meet this requirement. And then you can say, well, I only want to do 5 at a time or 10 at a time or 20 at a time. And what it'll do is it'll go and do those and then wait till resyncs are over. And then when resyncs are over, it'll pick up the next batch, right? Mm-hmm. So, whether it be guidance on Storage Hub, guidance on virtual blocks, we've got the VMware Learning Zone also, or, little pieces like this, some sample code that, that myself, William Lamb, and others have put out. We're trying to help, give customers the ability to use it in a smarter way, or I guess that's probably the best way of saying it, right? A smarter way, more efficient way, that type of thing.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because I actually, when I first migrated our company over to vSAN, I discovered that one the hard way. I had not been told anything along those lines. Our consultant was, very new. They didn't know very much about vSAN at the time, and I think we were one of their first customers. And I was applying a policy change to I think it was just one VM. I wasn't, trying to do a mass update, but it was a large enough VM that it said, okay, we need to make room for this, and we need to, move this around. And it just became a cascading effect that by the time I'm done, instead of like a couple of resyncing objects, I'm resyncing half my cluster.
So those moving things around to make room. Yeah,
exactly. So those are definitely some key things to be aware of. Jay's made some really good points in there to avoid some pitfalls. and the other thing to also make note of it, though, is that we were a much earlier adopter of vSAN than you are. So we were looking at not nearly as much protection, and adaptive resync wasn't a thing back then as well.
Oh, yeah.
So things have come a long way to make things much better.
Yeah, I don't think we had resync throttling or any of that kind of stuff at that time either. So constant updates to the product.
Yep.
Yeah, we could spend a half an hour just on the goodness of adaptive resync for sure, and the throttling as well. Yeah. And 6.7U1 also gives you the ability, when you're making policy changes, it gives you that notice right away. It says, oh, so you want to change this policy? Well, based on the amount of VMs that you have that have that policy, here's how much storage that's going to incur. So it gives you that upfront look like, do you really want to push that button?
Yeah, things that would have been nice in the older version I was running at the time. Those are some really nice safeguards you guys have added in.
Oh yeah.
Storage is cool.
Okay, Natasha.
Where did that come from?
Oh, that's a long story. I'll just say that's one of John's finds.
We'll save that for VM World.
Yeah, exactly.
Tony, do you have another question?
Let's see. Just kind of another thing along the lines of, your VxRail customer kind of thing. Another place that they're going to spend some time and learning the interface, learning information about the health of their cluster is going to be in the vSAN health monitoring section. There's a lot of good information in there. You can do capacity planning. Depending on the size of the cluster, you're going to have things like your one host node failure limit. So you can see how close you are to that. Object component health, resync objects, capacity. If you're using an all-flash cluster and you're using dedupe and compression, you'll be able to see how much space you're saving, your dedupe and compression ratio. So there's a lot of different things that you can see in there. You can see where individual components lie, what physical disk they are on. So there's a lot of good information in there to look for as well.
So, let me add to that. So Jeremy Merrill, who is one of the guys that I spend a little time back and forth with as far as vSAN mechanics and whatnot, really, really good guy over at Dell. He had a blog post. It's like, I forget the name of his site. It's something on the rails or something. I forget what it is. But I think with the absolute latest version of Rail, like 4.7.100, or I'm not sure of their numbering scheme, they now have a plugin for the H5 client. So you, as I understand it, you don't have to go into the Rail manager for a lot of the stuff that you used to. You can do it right from the HTML5 client, which is pretty cool.
Cool.
Awesome.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And the last thing I'd say that it's worth looking into as a new customer to vSAN is that there are different types of encryption that you could use. So you could use VMware encryption or vSphere encryption, which is a more VM level type encryption, or you can use vSAN encryption, which is at a cluster level for vSAN itself. So there's different, and so there's depending on your environment and depending on your needs for encryption, there are options. And so as a new customer to vSAN, it would behoove you to look into the two different types of encryption and see which one best fits your use case.
What if they don't actually need encryption?
Then they don't have to worry about it.
Right. I didn't know if it was on by
Everyone
default.
Needs encryption. No. I don't know. The thing, just the one little thing that I would say about encryption, right? And obviously, encryption does require an enterprise license of vSAN, but in fact, I think it's right. Yeah, right over here. You can't see it, but there's like this. Yeah, there it is. See it? You guys see that box right there? Right.
Yeah.
That's an old iOmega PX4 300R that I got from a government auction, and I've since pulled the drives out of it and everything. But I spun it up, and it had some IP address that I, wasn't on my network and whatnot. And so I got on Google, and I went and I was like, well, how do you reset a iOmega PX4 300R? And it gave me the steps, and I went through the steps, and it came back up, pulled a DHCP address, and I logged in with the admin account, and I found 10 years of personal data.
Oh my gosh.
10 years of personal data. And if I were, and I've even got a blog post on my website about it, if I were someone who were nefarious or whatever, I could have used a lot of that to destroy some lives or whatever, right? Illegal, identity theft and all that kind of stuff. I mean, social security numbers, credit card numbers. I mean, there was so much data on there, it was ridiculous.
Wow.
I wiped it. I mean, I don't want to have anything to do with that. But where I'm getting at with this is this was just some old file server sitting in a government office that they stored data. And then when it hit its lifespan, it's, when lifecycle management said it's this many years old, it's out. All they did was unplug it and go put it on a pallet and said it goes to auction. They didn't do anything about cleaning it or anything.
Wow.
And that's one of the great things about VM encryption and vSAN encryption is as long as they can't talk to the KMS to be able to retrieve the key to unlock the disks or unlock the VM, the data is useless.
Right.
Right. So
that is shameful. That should be criminal, actually.
It should be criminal. It should be criminal. But so, I mean,
that reminds me of like an old 60 Minutes clip I saw a couple of years ago where they were talking about these, electronics dump graveyards in Africa where, we in America, we ship our stuff to some recycling company and then they wholesale it to somebody else. And then it just ends up in some, Timbuktu, Africa country. And so these reporters like actually pulled some hard drives out of the pile, brought them home, plugged them into a machine, and were like pulling off all kinds of stuff from state agency.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that didn't surprise me one bit.
Yeah.
Now
I thought this was in the cloud.
Right.
When I decommission something, I decommission something.
Mm-hmm.
It's either going to, it's either going to get a sledgehammer, or I don't have a degauser to my, where I can get to it, or it's going to have a 5.56 round through it, or a 223, or a 9mm or something. It's going to be decommissioned and no longer usable.
Yeah.
And that's just, I mean, that's, the way I look at it is with VM encryption, vSAN encryption, the way we do things, it's easy to overcome that, what's the word I'm looking for? Laziness or lack of attention to detail or missing a step or policy, right? As far as that goes, it's easy. It's so easy because you've literally got to have a system up and running that can talk to your KMS. And if you don't have it, that's it. It's not, I mean, it's just not recoverable whatsoever,
It's a brick, like your iPhone.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So, and if people don't want to, clear their data, they can ship me their drives, and I'll go and I'll do all the paperwork, and I'll put some 5.56 rounds through them, and
You heard it here first, people. If you want to get rid of your data, send them to Jace.
This is Data Destruction Service.
They make good targets.
Nice.
Awesome.
I used to have a degauser though when I was in the military. It was so great. I mean, we would walk up to this thing, we'd open. I mean, this thing was huge, but it had a little, spot that was this big. And you put your drive in, and you close the thing, and then you go and you find like a top of an aluminum pot or pan, whatever, and you cover yourself with it. And then you hit the button, and you hear all the zzz, and it was degaussed. So
all right, so I know you guys aren't allowed to talk about a whole lot of future stuff, but let's do some hypotheticals here, okay?
Uh-oh.
I want each of you, Pete and Jason, hey Tony, if you want to, throw out a wish list item, let's do that too. What is one thing you wish vSAN could do that it currently can't?
So that's something Tony's asking, or that's something we're asking?
I'm just asking in general,
asking.
hypotheticals. What's something that it doesn't do today that you'd like to see it do?
JC should be right on point with this one.
So I don't know.
Not revealing anything.
No, it's not a vSAN thing specifically, right? But something that I've been vocal about is for instance the way that we deploy a vSAN witness. I would like that to be a bit more streamlined, and I'll say that we do have people that are looking at that, efforting that.
Cool.
And the reason I say that is I mean I do a lot of 2-node vSAN. I do a lot. I mean, I could literally do nothing but 2-node vSAN every day, all day, because there's that much call for it. Whether it be retailers or whether it be banking or like I said, retail, banking, some other customers I can't talk about, whatnot. I mean, there's literally that much call for it, and one of the things that we need to do better is the way we deploy a witness. I've got some workarounds, as far as that goes, but hopefully before too long we'll see some updates that make it a bit smoother.
Yeah, we just deployed a 2-node in September.
Mm-hmm.
Pete, do you have anything to add?
I'll do a safe one because and it's true. I mean, it's definitely true. As I would love to see vSAN be a fully fledged file server as well. Have file services that would be, just fully functional and do all the things that you want your file services to do for your array. And so that's definitely something that I'm excited about, and I think that hopefully in the future we'll have that.
Tony, so you're a customer. As a customer, what do you want to see that you don't get right now?
To be honest, a lot of the pain points have already been solved with past releases. My biggest sticking point right now is, and I completely understand why you guys had to do it, and it's not Jason, it's not Pete, it's other folks that are at fault on this one. But there was a critical vSAN patch that came out, and I absolutely hate the fact that I am stuck due to backup server situations and other things completely beyond my control. I cannot update my cluster right now, and I hate seeing that big freaking red X on my cluster that there's a vSAN critical patch available. And I panic every time I see it. And I'm like, oh yeah, it's just that. So now I'm desensitized to it. So if I see another critical vSAN error, I'm going to be like,
well, so
yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Go ahead, Pete. Go ahead.
I was going to say, well, they fixed that. vSAN 6.7 Update 1 gives you the ability to customize your alarms. So you can say, you know what, I know this, I'm not worried about this, and it'll go away. And you can actually silence specific alarms.
Yeah. So I have to update to be able to get rid of it, and I can't update to get rid of it.
To add to that, all right. So what Pete didn't say with that statement was in the UI. Right. So more importantly, and you're on 6.6, Tony. I know we've
yep.
I've worked with you a little bit on some of your clusters.
Yep.
But you can actually silence those alerts with 6.6 in, I think, either the Ruby vSphere console or with Power CLI. So there's a capability of doing that now with what you have. But after many of us, Pete, myself, a lot of the folks in the vExpert Slack, hey, I've got alarm fatigue and so on and so forth. Those kinds of things. They finally got it in the UI, which is really, really good. In that, and what I mean by that is as more and more people voice concerns, hey, we're seeing this, can we adjust this behavior, whatever, so on and so forth. The UI team is actually getting even more fluid when it comes to working with Sabu, as far as that goes. But you can silence that alarm. Maybe I need to carve that out and go put that in my my cookbook.
Yep.
If I get that done before the end of the week on how to silence alarm on pre 6.7 update 1. I know we've got some documentation out there.
Sounds like a good blog post, Jace.
Yeah, I got all my blogs for the past 6 months.
All right. Well, Tony, sounds like a good blog post for you then, buddy.
I guess I'll
Way to just hand out work,
take
Pete.
that one.
No,
The only thing.
Pete and I are thinking, how many blog posts have I got in?
Yeah.
Have I met my goals?
Exactly.
Yeah, that particular error was such a
PETA?
hole in the wall, limited
Yeah.
scenario that it just like to see that red in the cluster over that one is just like you'd have to be lame brain to hit that one, but I guess somebody did somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Do
no,
not
like I
extend
said,
your drives on SQL servers. Wow. Yeah.
yeah. So like I said, you could actually silence those through I'll say a non-UI based method today.
Okay. Don't worry, we'll schedule something later in the week.
Got goals due this week. We'll see. So
okay, next week.
He's busy this week. He's got stuff to do. Well, all right. I am out of questions. So, Tony, unless you have anything else that you want to add while you've got two extraordinarily knowledgeable people at your disposal.
I did have a real quick one. It's not anything critical. I'm just curious. There were some really good future-looking statements that were delivered by Duncan Epping at VMon in Chicago this last year. And one of them I thought was really interesting. It could really come in handy. Something that, your traditional SAN has had that vSAN up to now has not had. And maybe this is already delivered by now, but the hardware visibility. So the fact that you can physically light a LED on an individual drive, you can see a graphical representation of your physical server, and then you can have controls within the vSphere console, vSAN console for that. Is that something that is here or is still coming, still being worked on? What's the status on that?
So I think that we have some vendors that support that today.
Okay.
I'm not going to say that it's every vendor. I know who your vendors are, so I'm going to say I don't believe it's your vendor.
No, of course.
That goes. Some vendors do that. And if a vendor looks at that as value they want to provide, they may want to, they may decide to add that, right? So, just as an example, right? Pete mentioned a bit earlier in the podcast about VUM integration. Mm-hmm. We have a fair amount of VUM integration today, but we don't have VUM integration across every vSAN provider. And part of that is because we do work with them individually, and it could be that some that you may not have access to today may show up in 2 months or 6 months or whatever is important with their timeline as far as that goes. I think as far as actually showing a chassis and then drives in that specific chassis, that kind of stuff, I think that they do some of that in Rail today.
Okay.
May have that visibility with like some of the Dell Open Managed stuff or possibly the HPE Insight or whatnot, but I don't have any visibility into those specifically. I think as far as the lighting the drives up, it's I think it has to do, and John could go so much deeper than you or I could, Pete, as bad as
Oh yeah.
But it's being able to support an additional API call is what it is, right? With lack of a better thing. But if like something that I wanted to add to my cookbook coming up that I don't quite have in there yet, like I do have the ability to dynamically create disk groups based on the number of cache devices that you have. I basically look at, okay, you've got, let's say, 3 devices that are SSD and they're under this size. I'm going to consider those cache, and then I'll take whatever number of capacity drives, I'll divide that by 3, and that way I have a uniform distribution, right? So that's one thing I am doing now. However, something I'd like to do at some point, maybe in a 1.1 or 1.2 version of the same document, is actually be able to look at physical addresses, right, of the drives. That way I can ensure that I've got the cache device as well as the capacity devices on one controller, and the cache device and that kind of thing, right? Because I know like in your config you've got multiple controllers.
Right.
What if I wanted to be able to designate, so we see all that today, and all that's I don't know if this is a word or not, queryable. I know you can query for it, right, as far as that goes. So I don't think it's anything necessarily that that is that hard to do. It's just one of those things where are we going to get the most amount of bang and value for our customers, and which one are we going to try to tackle first? And sometimes that's our priority. Sometimes it's when it comes to a specific vendor, it's their priority, and it really is a kind of a delicate balance in working with them to have those those type things bubble to the top, if you will.
Cool. Yeah, I could really see some good use cases for that, especially if you're in a massive data center and you have a vSAN disk failure and you've got racks and racks of them. You're trying to narrow it down. I wonder if it calls back to like an ILO remote management card, or if it's
I don't know, but I've been doing a little bit of work lately with some Redfish over Power CLI or PowerShell, and I'm trying to do some additional work. It's not mature enough to the point where I can put it in the cookbook, but I'm literally at the point where I can go and I can query ILO, DRAC, whatever via Redfish, and be able to correlate that data. I think at some point as Redfish kind of matures a bit more, maybe we can go even further with that, because Redfish isn't really just a PowerShell, but it's just API based, as far as that goes, and any kind of language could leverage. There's the word leverage. Could use that. I know Ken's going to hear me say leverage, and he's going to give me hell about it tomorrow. So, because leverage is not a verb.
Not a verb. It's not a verb.
Real quick, that website that you had mentioned earlier, I found it. It is inside-the-rails.com.
Yep, that's Jeremy's site.
Yep.
And then for people who want to find your cookbook eventually, Jace, how do we get a hold of that?
It'll be on storagehub.vmware.com this week, and then I'll also have a blog post. That'll be an extra blog post, Mr. Arrow. I'll have a blog post out that basically will point straight at it, and I'll kind of talk about it. And I've got some configuration recipes, some operational recipes, and some reporting recipes in it. And when it goes to configuration, one of the interesting things about vSAN, because vSAN is part of vSphere, some of the stuff is not necessarily just vSAN centric. Like I go into how to create a VM kernel interface on a standard switch or a VD switch. Also go through and talk about how to dynamically add physical NICs to a VDS. I even talk about how to upgrade. Let's say you've got a 6.0 vSphere cluster, you upgrade to 6.7, you don't even look at your VDS. You'll probably find that your VDS is still on 6.0. I even go through how to upgrade the VDS. So the cookbook is not 100% vSAN. It's actually got some just vSphere centric stuff in it as well.
Cool. It sounds like it's going to be pretty helpful for people out there.
I think I'm at about 75 or 80 pages right now. Is what it's at.
Wow.
Nice.
Good stuff.
It's fun. I'm on Twitter while we're having this conversation, and it's really interesting doing a live show, because I'm seeing like Aaron K's on here saying, "Can't wait to see the cookbook, Jace McCarty." Like, it's live. So that's cool. That's pretty cool.
We are live.
Yeah, it's definitely a different dynamic than the way that you do virtually speaking, because it's you've always got to edit it and whatnot. Because if you've been on virtually speaking with Pete, it's like, oh, and we're gonna cut that out. That was good. That was good. We'll keep that, right? Cut that out. Cut that out.
Yeah, I like the mistakes. It makes it feel real.
So it's a bit different.
It's raw.
Yeah. Unlike here.
We'll do it live.
That's right. Thanks, Bill. All right. Well, hey, unless anybody has anything else to add, I'm good. I can play us out, and we can. As John would say, let's land this plane.
I was gonna steal that line. Dang it! You beat me to it.
Do we want to ask one more time though, for anybody who is live watching, if they have any more questions? I mean, we've got a few more minutes. This is it's a good forum, if you will, right?
Well, you can ask that, and I will say, gentlemen, before you do take off, thank you for having us. It's definitely it's an honor to be on your show. I'm a big fan of you guys. Keep doing what you're doing, and I look forward to hearing more from you guys. So good stuff.
Yeah, thanks for being open to join us, Pete. Yeah. I mean, this has been great. If you want me to send you the audio file for you to use anything, let me know.
Good idea. I'll just get it off YouTube. What are you talking about?
Oh, there's that too. Yeah. All right. I'm just gonna call it. So if you guys are good, I'll play us out. So hang on a second.
Sounds good.
And we will kill the stream when I'm done with the close.
Thanks, guys. Cool.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Are we supposed to be doing music?
Once again, this has been Gigacast episode 26 for Sunday, January 27th. This has been an amazing VSAN. Truly, the VSAN is strong with this episode. So, thanks again to Mr. Pete Fletcher, Mr. Jason McCarty. Pete is at VPedroAero on the Twitters. Jace is at Jace McCarty. I am at VCIXNV. Tony is at Import Car Guy. The show is at VGigacast. And check out Virtually Speaking if you haven't already. If you're listening to this show, you probably already know about it. But definitely check out Virtually Speaking. And we will be back again sometime in February. I don't have a guest fully booked yet, but we're working on it. I'll let you know more about that. Follow us, subscribe, and share. And have a wonderful, wonderful February. Go Rams.
Hey, that's not my Super Bowl. We were robbed.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
All right.
I stopped the recording.
Stopping the stream. Good night, everybody.